those times when you are experiencing the most amount of uncertainty and the deepest amount of pain and the deepest amount of questioning is when God shows up the most profound. He doesn't show up in the same way at all when you're coasting or when you're on autopilot or when you're just hanging out. He shows up powerfully when you don't know if your wife's going to live or you don't know how the situation is going to turn out. There's an uncertainty, and it deals with like mortality and like serious big weighty issues. When that happens and God shows up in a profound way, and he does, it changes everything. I'm Jeremy, and this is Rachel with the Pat Notes, and next year is our 15-year wedding anniversary.
We met at a pool hall.
Yeah. So it wasn't the greatest pool hall in the world, and I don't even know if you liked me at first. You probably didn't care for me very much at first sight, at least.
When Jerry and I started dating, what drew me to him was just a gentleness. I just saw in him goodness that maybe he didn't even see in himself yet. And 6 months after that, we were married.
Early on in our relationship, I don't think I professed being a Christian because I really wasn't a Christian at all. At that point in my life, you could say that I had some sort of idea of what God might look like. It would be a God I hated and didn't want to have anything to do with. There was a lot of anger and frustration inside of me. And there were a few times where I probably opened up and said some things that were a little bit dark about my past and about what I believed and what I didn't believe. For the most part, I kept that pretty distant, pretty packed away.
The amount of anger and everything that he was experiencing, I really didn't have the full picture of what that was. I just knew that God had something different for Jeremy.
I would have labeled myself as an atheist. Now, I didn't come out and like advertise that to her. I didn't want to scare her, and there was compartmentalization inside of me, a kind of a tide pulling me out into something bigger that started to become more clear as our relationship progressed and as we started having our children.
We celebrated our 3rd anniversary, and a few days later we had our first child.
When my son was born, he was completely healthy and everything was really good. And after he was delivered, there was a lot of blood, more than there should be, and it wasn't stopping. And it scared me. Probably more than anything else has ever scared me before. And me, a guy who would have told you the day before, if I was being honest with you, don't believe in God, and if he is real, I don't really care to know him, was praying for about 3 hours straight. During my prayers, I'd even said, God, if you're real and you save her, I will give my life to you. You'll have my life. Whatever you want to do, it's yours.
I started to notice a change in Jeremy in subtle ways. A lot of the questioning God, like if you're real, will you show up, wasn't really talked about between us. But the Bible was out, so I began to pray for him, and that this Jesus that was very real to me, that Jerry would come to know him. So I would just pray, God, do it now. Like, I'm ready, he's ready. Now we have a son. So I was just waiting.
With our second child, like a complete like deja vu of the most horrible moment in my life. I remember thinking, God, this is not going to happen. Is it going to happen again? The doctor had like 2 or 3 solutions, and I'm praying. I think I'm going to pass out. They finally stabilized her. She had 2 blood transfusions there. But I remember the promise that I made to him when I wasn't really even a believer was that I was going to give him my life, like he was going to have it. Whatever he wanted to do was his. I didn't keep my promise to him. I gave parts of me, but I didn't give the whole me. And I realized this huge disparity in affection, and that I hadn't lived up to my end of the deal. If my life is a chessboard, God was moving pieces in place. In his grace, he's designed it that way so that we can see who actually is in charge of the situation at all times.
Soon after we had the baby, we found out that I had heart failure that was induced by pregnancy. And it was pretty dire for a while. We didn't know that I would recover. The doctors didn't think that I would. I really thought that I was going to die, and that I would have to leave my family behind. It was really hard. I had never known such peace though. Like, God had given me such peace in him, and knowing that if that was it, if that was my time, that I would be joining him.
After 2 pregnancies that had major complications, and now 6 months after this, and I think like this is where things are going to fall apart for me. I honestly thought that I was going to be a single parent. I thought that I wasn't going to have the person who I loved and shared my life with around anymore, and that was almost too much for me to bear. But God is gracious, and you recovered. In those times when you are experiencing the most amount of uncertainty and the deepest amount of pain and the deepest amount of questioning, and God shows up in a profound way, and he does, it changes everything. It changes how you look at him. You recognize him as a kind of God who goes down and gets on his knees and comes to you and loves you where you're suffering. And if you didn't have those moments, if you didn't have suffering, if you didn't have valleys, you would never even have an idea of that kind of love. You would never experience the beauty of that. You pray an awful lot in the valleys. You don't pray a lot on the peaks, but in the valleys you're on your knees all the time, and God shows up.